Welcome back, everybody. I'm Phil Van Pelt, one of the co-hosts here for Canescast, as well as a contributing writer on Yardbarker.com and a reporter here in Billings, Montana for our local CBS affiliate. We're happy to have you guys back, and we're ready to talk some Canes football recap of Miami versus Miami that saw our Miami, the real Miami, dominate, and then a look at what we got coming up against the Texas A&M Aggies, a game that we definitely want revenge for.
Welcome back, everybody. This is going to be a fun week going into our first big test of the season. So, Bill and I can't wait to break it down here for you.
He did forget to mention, but it's old Garrett Halsey on the other side here. So we got that's I don't want to leave his name hanging here, but we're excited to have you guys back. I want to ask you, Garrett, first of all, what did really what did you like and what you didn't like? We're going to kind of break into that a little bit here in the Miami versus Miami game. There was a lot to like, very little to not like, in my personal opinion. But what did you like and what didn't you like against in our week one matchup?
Well, as you just alluded to, Phil, I think the most important thing is that we're looking at this from the perspective of what we really were expected to do, which was play well, play sound, all phases. They're really, outside of really digging in and nitpicking to find something to really work on or talk about, the performance was really what we would like to have seen. In the show that we did previous to this, I was tentative on being bold and saying that we were going to dominate that game because just how things have been lately, you just weren't sure. You weren't sure who was going to show up for week one and how things were going. So that's the most, attractive thing is that we are looking at a football team that we expected to expect. This is what Miami football should be about. Getting started on the season with a team that's, a nice tune-up, really for a big game for week two. This is what you wanted to see. So I'm happy to say that's what I'm most happy about is that there really isn't anything to complain about.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that, we talked about, we were watching that game. The biggest complaint you had during it was the fact that we didn't get to see Jakari Brown come in backing up Tyler Van Dyke once obviously the game was no longer in any kind of question, which it never really was. But obviously you want to see the starters get as many reps as they can before a big game like this, especially in a game where we're not going to show a lot of the playbook because, it was a route. We're beating them down from the beginning. So there's no need to kind of put any guys out there at risk. I think I thought Emory Williams played really well. It was basically perfect in his debut, and that's great. And he fits a lot of what Tyler Van Dyke does well, and that's why they like him, obviously the accuracy wise. But we've talked a lot about Jakari and the athletic side of the, coin that we don't really see at the quarterback position, or we haven't since, De'Aaron King, that you personally would love to embrace. And I think for me, I think the whole Jakari Brown thing isn't finished being written yet. I think we're going to see Brown play this season, and I think that we will see him, in a game like Bethune-Cookman coming up. I'm sure we'll see him get some reps, but I think we'll see him in some packages because he's just too athletic to keep off the field. I hope that that's the case, and I don't think his story's done yet either because he can continue to develop. And even if Emory edged him just on the accuracy side of things this year, he's got another offseason to fight for that starting position. So I'm excited for that.
And that's to go back to the point you made about me not really being all that fond of not seeing Jakari be the second quarterback is, to me, that's the player that has so much potential just because as this game evolves, it's so hard to be only good at one thing, and I'm not saying you can't have a pocket passer and be successful or a running quarterback and be successful. You really, either one can be. I just think having seen things really, and I'll go back to that Texas team of 2005, where they really, that to me was the perfection of the spread offense and the kind of the spread option offense at that time because, their quarterback could really get things done with his legs. I've been envious of seeing that kind of a system because I just feel like that's very hard to stop. And people were sitting there saying how this is the greatest college football team since 2001 Miami, this USC team that he took down. I mean, they had great players all over their defense. Everyone questioned, well, how is this Texas team going to keep up? Well, the answer was just one man. I mean, really, they had a decent run back, good line, good receivers. But when it came down to it, and that last play was the ball is in one guy's hands, and he just cannot be stopped. He's that physical, he's that big, he's that dynamic, he's that fast. to me, that's where we miss out a lot of times when we have those tough games, is we just have missed that guy that can just take the ball in his hands and just cannot be denied because he's just that much better than everyone else. And having seen Jakari play those couple games that he got last year, I thought I saw that, a guy that if you put him in the position, he's physically able to take the ball and get some yards, and we were having such a problem passing the ball. Well, you can throw the ball, but that doesn't necessarily mean the guy's going to catch it, or doesn't mean the defender's not going to make the play on the ball. But when the ball's in the guy's hands, it's certain that if he takes off, you're in a better bet that he's going to have a successful end to that particular rep. So yes, that's what I wanted to see when we were up in the game. I wanted to see that guy get on the field and then get more work and be ready when it's his time. And like you said, Emory Williams didn't disappoint. He looked every bit as ready for the time for his calling that you'd want a guy to be. So that's just the only thing I don't see outside of Jakari Brown on our team, is anybody who's capable of, nothing else is there. We're really not getting, a whole lot of movement. But guess what? When I get back and I get this ball in my hands, you've got to respect that. You've better keep an eye or a couple eyes on me. And that, to me, as you get better and you get more comfortable, is where then all of a sudden now those receivers are slipping past that coverage, and now you got that opportunity to take those shots. That's just my preference. I love that kind of football. I love watching it. I think you see that a lot in the NFL nowadays. These guys it's harder to find a guy that sit back and just dissects defenses and can spit the ball in and out of their hands, because that's difficult. Defenses are smart. They're not sitting back and just, letting things get washed over them. They're making adjustments and they're playing to the game. And I think that's where it gets harder. When a guy, and you saw it with Mahomes at the playoffs, the biggest plays that he made in those last couple of games, a lot of them were his legs. And the guy was hurt. He had a bad ankle in some of those plays, and it was so dangerous, and those plays were so important that he got that 15, 20 yards when they were there to get up the field. So that's just what I like. Hopefully someday to see that we will, Jakari Brown, like you said, if his time is going to be, we're going to see him play in Miami when it is that time. I'm looking forward to that. But again, if it's Emory Williams and then the kid that we have committed here coming up after that, and we never really get to see Jakari Brown play at Miami, I will be a little disappointed. But as long as we're winning games, who am I to say that my way's better? The coaches get to see these guys every day. And as long as the team plays and is playing good football, then I will sit here and say, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. And I think honestly, what we see from that is just a trust factor. It must be, because I understand if everything is stymied on offense and you can't move the ball at all, you have that threat of, okay, like now the numbers are even, I'm going to go out and get mine because I have the ability to be faster than guys on defense and turn that corner and create that fear. So now all of a sudden they got to watch what I'm doing here. And then guys are running open. I just think it must come down to a consistency thing. And I don't even know from one game that it comes down to that. It could have just been, you know what? They thought that Emory won the week going into the practice week, so he deserved those reps. And then we might see again Jakari in another game that we're winning big. Bethune-Cookman, I think both will play, because we think that that game, everyone thinks that game should be a pretty big blowout. So everybody should see a lot of time in that game. But another game, we might see Jakari in that aspect. And maybe, just maybe, they have packages that Jakari's going to get in this season that they're not going to show that against in any capacity against a team that they're running away with the game against. So
like Shannon Dawson addressed, the plan is maybe to redshirt both of these guys. Yeah. And now I would argue that you don't want to use, if you're gonna 4 games for one guy, 4 games for the other guy, and then 4 games you're maybe not going to see either one because they're going to be the starter all the way through the end of the game because they're tight. In my opinion, I hope they don't do something like that where they put both of them in one game. If it were me, it's let one of them play, let them take the whole amount of reps till the end of the game. Because again, to spread that out, to be sure that by the end of the season, let's say the worst thing happens and your starter's not available. Now what are you going to do? You really, That's where I was a little frustrated. I was like, why burn this? Why have burned Jakari's red shirt last year? What was the reasons? Last year was a loss. Basically, more or less anything that happened last year is just out the window. But that was where I was frustrated. I was like, there's talent here. There's something to work with. Let's if you're gonna shelf the guy, then shelf him. Let's get him ready for when his time is coming. But like Shannon Dawson said, I plan on using them both. If that is, again, one guy gets 4 games, the other guy gets 4 games, and then there's 4 toss-ups or left to be open. I just wanted to say clearly, I hope the heck they don't do that where they both play in one game. If it's going to be that way, I'm kind of on board with that type of an idea. Then they both really have the opportunity to show who's better next year and take over. Don't screw it up again. Don't waste that time to get those guys, that experience for down the road, because I think both of them have talent, and I don't want to sit here and say one or the other is the guy I'm going to go forward in the future, because I want to be a supporter of the team and the coach's decisions. But I like that, but don't waste it by doing a game unnecessarily to use both guys. That's all I'd say.
And I could see that. I think that I say that against Bethune because it should be theoretically a game you win, at least 50, 60, 70, 80 to, maybe not to nothing, but you're going to hang a lot of points. So you're going to get everybody to play at those points. So you like to spread the wealth. Now, I think this week will go a long way in showing that if Brown does get in, we'll kind of get an idea of kind of, hey, this is kind of what we're looking at. He's going to have some packages this year, and those packages might come up in big games. So hence Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, right? Big games that we have. Those are the games that you would use something like that. Otherwise, then we will see Emory against Bethune and against, if we route Temple and things like that, games that you should win are big ACC wins that you dominate wire to wire. And you let him get in, and then we'll see Jakari like that. So it'll go a long way. This week will go a long way, and it'll go a long way too if we were to just win the game big. Who gets in at the end of the game if they do something like that in a game like Texas A&M? Because in that game you might just kind of keep your foot on the gas and not put anybody else in just for ranking purposes, which is what I guess teams mostly do anyway throughout the year. But you know what I'm saying as far as keeping your starters in and really putting your foot on the gas, especially against a Jimbo team who has never had any issue doing that to other people in my mind. So I don't mind returning the favor if the opportunity arises. That's a completely different conversation. But Jakari, that running quarterback thing I do want to touch on. He provides the build of a Vince Young, right? And the whole thing comes down to me, what I was saying earlier is if those passes that are there because of your threat of running aren't being hit, that's the fear. And I don't think that they trust, or maybe they do. And again, we don't know yet. It's way too early based on what we've seen. We have one game, he didn't get in, and we don't know what the plan is for the rest of the season when you're only showing so little of the playbook in that. We will see as the weeks go on, we'll have a much clearer view. But if that's the reason, if they don't trust that he's hitting those targets yet, and he has what we've seen, what we've heard in the offseason, his accuracy's gotten a lot better. If that's continuing to progress in the right direction, yeah, I think Jakari is going to be hard to keep off the field because of the threat. Now, we've talked to Eric King, faster than anybody else, one of the fastest guys in college football. He could move, but he didn't provide the physical aspect. He had the speed aspect, but you trusted his arm. He could hit. Malik Rozier, that's the only other running quarterback we could go back to, and we had our most successful season we've seen in recent memory. Rozier,
and absolutely, that's what was kind of like we had the proof in the pudding almost. And we said if Malik Rozier,
we had no other option either.
If Malik Rozier was 2 inches taller and half a second 40 faster, how much more success would we have had that 2007 season, right?
2017. The thing with Rozier though is Rozier ran physical. He wasn't as fast or as quick as Eric King, but he added a much more physical aspect. But they still didn't have the bigger build of like the 6'4" running quarterback like Vince Young, which is what everybody goes to. But yes, everybody would always want a Vince Young. If you have a Vince Young, it's going to go a long way towards whatever. Regardless of how you feel about him as a pro quarterback, as a college quarterback, did big things. It was kind of I will say this too. He was kind of there was running quarterbacks, but that build that we're seeing a lot more of now, or that prototype as far as the quarterback that can be able to make something happen, we saw a lot less back then. We're seeing it a lot more now. So he was kind of ahead of his time, I think, in that moment.
He did take time. I mean, he got to the red shirt his first year. He never played a snap year one. it was really year two. They kind of sprinkled him in, gave him a chance. There was a competition between him and another quarterback. Mild success. He wasn't even really successful. It wasn't until the end of that next year where the Michigan game came up. You know what I mean? He dominated the Rose Bowl that year. Then it was the next year that was the 2005 season, and they were the champs at the end of the year, right? They gave the guy enough time to get his bearings, because it doesn't just happen for a guy right away. You know what I mean? He doesn't just step on the field and, there's very few Bryce Youngs that their first start they dissect and blow up.
During the games, the two big things, or I guess three things. I don't really want to see Restrepo. We talked about that fair catch. It didn't bother him. It didn't hurt us. Didn't hurt us fair catching that ball at the 5, because obviously there was that penalty. Kind of got bailed out there. But I don't like to see a fair catch deep. People, that it's minuscule. But remember that a lack of a fair catch, I guess, cost us big time against Texas A&M this time last year. So special teams miscues, I just want to, you can't have them. Nip it in the butt. You make that mistake, then you don't do it again. The defensive lapse, it was the only lapse of the game in the 2-minute drill that Miami of Ohio ran to get that field goal right before half. And then obviously we tacked it on right before as well. So we matched it, ended up not mattering. That was a defensive lapse. And then obviously the interception Van Dyke threw, which I really think was just a bad ball. I think he put too much air, floated, didn't see the safety, made that mistake. Personally, I think there's a silver lining to those plays. I think you can make that mistake in a game like that. So every mistake, you're going to learn a lot more from your mistakes than you will your successes. So I don't mind it. I don't mind seeing those things happen, because you get it out of your system, hopefully. And they're not going to play perfect the rest of the year. We know that, but get it out of your system when it can't hurt you. Make those mistakes. And everybody wants to be perfect in beatdowns of teams like Bethune-Cookman and stuff. But if I make a couple of mistakes, taking risks, you learn from those. So those don't bother me. It's like making mistakes in preseason football when you're playing teams you should beat. Now, Miami of Ohio was not necessarily that team. I'm proud of the way they came out and they fought. We didn't leave things in question. There was fighting words before the game with the real Miami thing. We talked about that last week. Miami of Ohio was ranked top 20 in run defense last year. We dominated them on the ground. 250 yards. It was almost 7 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns, crushed it. Great to see across the board. A team that should win the MAC. Now it's group of 5, not power 5, but they could be a tough out for a lot of teams in the country. And we've seen lesser teams beat much better teams in, Appalachian State beat Michigan, right? It's the iconic example, but things happen in college football. We see teams get pushed at different times. Georgia wasn't as crisp as they could have been in their first game against a walkover. So first game, I like a lot of what I saw with a new offensive coordinator, new players, guys returning from injury. But I will just say that I think that I'm a lot more confident heading into this game with the attitude, the energy, and the effort of the team, because, we watched a team that really seemed like they quit last year. And just on the surface, our lines across the board feel so much more dominant. To be able to protect and great and the run game there is going to carry us a long way this year. So I'm super excited for that. I know I just said a lot there, but how do you want to, what are your thoughts on how things look?
I do want to piggy off of the offensive coordinator, because I don't think they really showed a lot of, explosive down the field passing, and they hit a big play, which is still, encouraging. But the most important thing that I saw from Shannon Dawson is actually after the game, when he more or less took the fall for that interception. In his words, it was, bad time to call that play, where, to me, that speaks volumes to a guy, going to bat for his player. So to me, that's something that was missing, obviously, last year was, a good relationship between the players and the coaches. So seeing that that's the kind of guy that Shannon Dawson is, he's willing to, fall in that axe for a player in a bad execution, or whatever it may have been, really taking the responsibility was pretty awesome to me. So I really appreciate that that's the kind of guy that we have leading our offense now. On Guidry's side, I thought the defense was as good as you can get. They gave up really a long pass play at the end in really garbage time, but Damari Brown, I think, had a pretty good pass he got but that was just a good catch, good play, good execution. He was right there. But the defense looks really nice. I like, they're more of a load the line with 7, 8 guys, kind of confuse the offense. You can't really a feel for, it's 4 guys sitting in front of you, 2 guys sitting in linebacker depth every single play. That stuff gets very easy to dial in on and hone in on, and it gets, stale. So that was the speak of what we were going to look forward to coming in, is that he runs a lot of different looks, and it was just nice to see how, where our guys going to line up. And offensively, we touched on it too. Getting the young player Samson Okunlola and that Matt McCoy guy on the field in kind of that tight end jersey, but lots of different looks. That's what I think will be key to going forward, especially in this week coming up, is being unpredictable. As many curveballs and as dynamic as you can be, you got to have many different ways to come at somebody. So, power run game, I think we can go four receivers when necessary. I do believe that we will see some shots downfield in this game coming up where we didn't see those in the first week, but that's what I liked. I liked what we got to get a little taste of. I think, I feel as good about going into this second game as possible without literally sitting here and guaranteeing victory of any, substance, but everything looked efficient. Everything looked like you'd want to see a decent, or hey, hopefully a good football team start off a season.
And that's the thing too, going into this game, obviously last year we pushed those guys, and they're Texas A&M, as bad as, we both looked last year. I mean, Texas A&M fans are not going to sit there and say they had a good season. They didn't, and we didn't have a good season either. For potentially different reasons, as far as, first year rebuilding, offensive coordinator, weird fits on things and a lot of injuries. We heard a lot of different things about A&M, as far as, are they buying in and all this other different stuff, but they're loaded with talent. They had top recruiting classes, and we know that they're a talented squad, and we pushed them. If we capitalized on one of those trips last year, red zone trips, and just make one less mistake, really, that was our biggest thing, not being able to cash it in the end zone or the red zone. And like I touched on earlier, that Tyreek Stevenson play was huge because that fumble just shifted momentum. We were going toe to toe, felt good at their place. Talent, it's not all coming together, but they have the talent to compete at a very high level, as do we believe that we do. But also, going back to that, like you're talking about these young guys, that's what my most recent article I touched on that I wrote for Yardbarker was about, the fact that Miami had more true freshman snaps played by any team in the ACC by a good margin. 180, I think next closest was 152 by Clemson. So it was great to see those guys get some play. That's, to me, is a commitment to this rebuild and building things in the right direction. The transfer portal should always be a piece of what you do now. It's college free agency. Add the talent when you can, and add it in the pieces that make an impact. Francis Malgo in the back, we're talking about, him at right tackle is huge because he's getting those reps, but then his brother playing at linebacker is making a huge difference for us. So getting these guys reps, that's the transfer portal and that together. But when we talk about Damari Brown getting reps, Mark Fletcher getting reps, these are guys that are going to be a piece of the puzzle for us for a while, and they need to get those reps. So having the guys that played last year because of injury, plus guys returning from injury, plus these guys getting the reps now, it's only going to help their development quicker. Those are things that I'm excited about and can help speed this rebuild along, because we have the talent to have a solid year this year. And that's something, as good as the run game played, the linebacking core did not seem like a weakness in too many times last year. And for in many years recently, it's been, if our defensive line doesn't make the play, because there's talent, right? Whether you Jalen Phillips and Greg Rousseau, we have guys, then our secondary has to do it. Our secondary has to make something happen. Whatever you think about DJ Ivey or Tyreek Stevenson, they did make plays for us. And that was what it was, right? Like, it was our secondary having to follow up. And I feel like this is the first time in a while, you can say since, Cornerman Pigney, that our linebacking core doesn't feel like it's going to be a weakness. And we have a true leader at linebacker, Lamauanoa, that can actually dictate and control the defense and make the calls that you got to see. A difference-making linebacker at a university that has as many good linebackers, just about anybody in the history of college football come out of this program. It's been too long, and it's great to see that we have that. And that's going to be a huge difference against, a Texas A&M. So now we get into it. my first thing I want to touch on is those reps and how important it is for a guy like Damari Brown to have those reps as a big corner. A lot of guys covet, a lot of teams covet now. 6'2", 195. He's long. He's just going to continue to grow. Put on weight wise, right? We don't know if he's going to continue to grow taller. But Texas A&M, 6'6" wide receiver, Noah Thomas, and then Walker is 6'4", I believe, for them. They got some big threats. Obviously, will probably be, in my mind, the best safeties that they see all season. I love our defensive line. I like our linebacking core, like I said, but our corners got to be able to cover. I think for me on the offensive side, we got to push them too. Like you said, we'll see some shots. We'll see a lot more of the playbook, thinking that we maybe saw 30-something% of the playbook against Miami of Ohio. We'll start to open things up. And obviously we're not going to show those plays because we want to keep those plays for Texas A&M. I do like our ability to potentially control the tempo in this game. That's a big key for me. I think that as good as their defensive line is, our offensive line looks stout. We got graders up there. Matt Lee, Javion Cohen were gigantic. Having those guys makes all the difference in the world. If we can control the ball, if we can control the tempo of the game and do things on our terms, run the ball down their throat. We got a 4-headed monster at running back. 4 guys I feel confident handing the rock to behind that line, and just hit your shots when they're there. Quick passes, but Van Dyke's got the arm. I want to see some bombs. I want to see a couple connections deep. We can push their secondary just like they feel they can push ours. And I don't fear, their safeties like they should fear ours. Doesn't mean they're not going to hit passes deep. But I like our ability to control the tempo, and that can come out in our favor, I think, pretty heavy, because if we can control the clock, they're going to start getting antsy. And I think you can force them into taking shots, because they did whatever they wanted against New Mexico. They want to take those shots, right? And if you can force them into something that's not there because they're not getting the opportunities on the field, you can force them into mistakes because we're controlling the ground, we're controlling the ball, controlling the line of scrimmage, controlling the time of possession. That to me is going to be a huge key for this game.
So a visual I kind of want to put forth for everybody is, the season works along like a lot like a stock. If you go back and take a peripheral view of, a good stock, right? You start low and you make some gains, and then all of a sudden the player gets hurt, and then you're not quite as good a team, and then you suffer, great win, great loss, So if you take the peripheral view, that's what, more or less every year you kind of start down, right? You ended somewhere, and then all of a sudden you lost seniors and you got to replace new guys. So your team's got to work its way back up, right? So that's kind of like you're saying. You get these guys experience, you got to get better as the season goes along, right? And you're going to have some hurdles. An important person's going to go down. So is that next guy up? Is he ready to fill that spot equally, or heck, sometimes if you're in a good position, he'll be better. So as the season goes along, that's, huge. It was huge to get a good win in, to get those guys on the field that might not have been in a dogfight, guys that might not necessarily see as many snaps in this second week. But it's important for them to get those reps. What I'd really like to see going into the second game against Texas A&M, their receiver, that number 3, he's very good at using his subtle moves to keep the defender's hands away from the ball. So those first 2 touchdowns he caught were masterful, positions. He did a fantastic job of getting his defender walled off so he could get to those balls without, any possibility of getting knocked away. That's a skill set, as a receiver. As a defender, you hate it. You want to see a flag call, but as a receiver, that's basically art. So I think Texas A&M's strength is their defensive line. I think they have very athletic defensive ends. I think they got really thick, big defensive tackles. It'll be, a good battle for our guys in the interior. And then I think their skill receivers out there are very, very skilled. I think they got lots of weapons. So what I want to see is, is our cornerbacks going to come to work, because I think this game's going to be a test on their will a little bit, because I think there's going to be a catch or two that maybe should have drawn up offensive pass interference. It's not going to get called. I think that's probably the biggest thing. Are they going to be resilient? Are they going to be able to, a shot or two, or maybe if we're down in the game, are they going to be able to hold up and play up to the competition? And really, I think, like you said, controlling the ball, imposing our will. So is our offensive front going to be able to go in there and go up against, I think, one of the best D lines, if not the best D line that we're going to see this season. Outside of Florida State, Clemson didn't look all that dominant. North Carolina's got a couple good players. So this is a true test. As our offensive front, this will show where are we at, because this is every bit of what they can handle, I think. So I honestly think the game's going to be tight. I do think we win this game. I really think it's going to be a close one. So I'll give a score prediction. I think we're going to have 28-25. I think that's going to come down to the end of the game. I think the ball is going to be, hopefully in our hands the very last chance, and I think we're gonna get away from this schneid at Hard Rock, not getting any SEC opponents beat. I think we're gonna go ahead and get it done this week. Go Canes!
I mean, I'm right there with you. That's why I mentioned the ball control thing is, I think it's huge. I think it's being able to control the clock and make things happen on our time, I think is going to go a long way. Yeah. We're going to see the offensive line, the improvement. We're going to really get to see that in this game. Absolutely. But I do want to point back to what you said earlier about it being like a stock, right? There's going to be dips. There's going to be, peaks and valleys that you see throughout a season. But the bottom line is, are you continuing in the right direction? Do you let a bad game keep you down, or do you continue to grow? We've seen that way too many times in our history, where not in our history, our recent history, we had games before where, back in Miami's heyday, really, the 80s, 90s, 2000s, early 2000s, right? When, things started kind of going downhill, right? 06, 07, where you stopped seeing those teams where if something happened, we responded by just destruction, by stomping a team to death and not taking our foot off the gas. I mean, what is 2000? We get screwed out of the championship, putting a one-loss Florida State, whose one loss was against us in the championship. And what did they do? They scored all of 2 points against Oklahoma because of a ball snapped over the head. I mean, it wasn't even, they didn't deserve to be there, and they got, Oklahoma won. So whatever. But our one loss against Washington, what did we do? We returned the favor the next year at home, 62-7. So that's the kind of attitude that I want to start seeing. I want to start seeing that resiliency and the bounce back. I think college football as a whole, expanding the playoff, will go a long way for that, because before, all teams struggle with the thing of, hey, you lose a game, man, I can't lose again. You lose again, and it's like, wow, it's probably over as far as my playoff hopes. So as that expands, hopefully that allows teams some wiggle room to maybe you drop 2, 3, even 4 games, and you're still a good team. You have an opportunity to get into the tournament and see where that can take you. And I think that that's important. But controlling the clock, back to the Texas A&M thing, controlling the clock leads to a position of I think Texas A&M is going to do, they did what they want when they wanted. They weren't overly impressive in the run game to me against New Mexico, but a team like that's going to do what they want when they want. They got these receivers. They want to take those shots. If you make a team antsy and they reach for it when it's not there, you create turnover opportunities. So to me, that's huge. That's important. That's why I touched on it earlier. And I think that in a game in Miami, I know it's hot in Texas. I know it can be humid, but it's not the same weather. And in a game where you could see potentially rain, who knows? I think there's just an opportunity for A&M to make a few more mistakes than Miami makes in a game like this, and that could be the difference. Last year, it was the difference. Miami made those mistakes in College Station, and Texas A&M won a game that we didn't know what to think at that point because they were both ranked, and it just was a sloppy game that you're like, what are these teams? Were these two really good defenses stymieing each other? Well, it turned out that neither team really did much that year, last year. So that's really what we were watching. But it's two teams that still have a lot of talent, to have expectations of themselves this year. So let's see it turn into something. Noah Thomas is the guy you were talking about, number 3. I do want to say his name, obviously. 6'6", big receiver.
Yeah, I was purposefully avoiding saying his name. I was going to give him credit on this show.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I got to give, the guy's a competitor. I don't mind dropping a name. I don't mind dropping a name. I think you got to acknowledge it. I think that the guy's 6'6", he's a big threat. They're going to take shots to him. We know that. But hey, if he's out there committing penalties, I want it attached to his name too, so I'm fine with that. On the score prediction thing, I do think that we're going to see more shots downfield. We're going to see a more creative playbook. we're going to see, which is more of the playbook. There's the outside shot. We could see some packages with Jakari Brown. And I think that we could end up, to me, I think you went 28. I'll go a little higher. I went a little higher than you last week. I'll keep that pace. It worked last week. It'll work again this week, hopefully. I think 31 points for us. I think we can hang 31 points on these guys. I think 31-24 is a score that you can look back at, be proud of. And it's a game where, our offense shows enough, our defense shows enough, and you get the W. So 31-24, Miami makes enough plays, controls the ball on the ground. And I just got to say that in a game like this, I would like to see one splash play.
I was just about to say,
on defense or special teams, preferably both. You get one each, but a turnover, I don't want to say it has to be a blocked punt or a big thing, but the splash play could even be like Rashard Smith, the opening kickoff, took it 40 yards back.
Took it right out of my mouth, bro. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Something that you can do to swing the game in your favor. And for the love of who, please receive the ball at halftime. That, to me, I love it. That can flip games in an instant. We see it every single week. You're down, you get a late score, which was what Miami, Ohio was hoping for, but we responded. We got the field goal right back, and then they did nothing out of halftime. But that's how you flip games. You get that score, you steal it, you get that possession back after halftime, and you create yourself, if we're down, right? That's how you either open the game up or you close the gap and come back in games. Obviously, everybody knows that. But if we have the opportunity, I'd love to receive the ball at half, let our defense get things going, and see how it goes from there. But I'll let you roll. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't want to, but that was really the player I was just thinking in my head. I think this game somehow, and this is just willy nilly, I'm just throwing this out there. I think Rashad Smith ends up making the biggest difference of nobody. I don't see a lot of people talking about special teams. And I think it killed us last year. I like to see that is what really brings us above and beyond this year. I really think he's got all the talent. And I think he's kind of flying under the radar because of some of the receiver, the way that's gone. I think he's the guy that comes in and makes a big play somehow, big return, kicker or punt. I don't care, either one. But I think this is a game where we need that kind of a pop.
I agree. And on special teams, it's funny that you said that. I'm trying to look up last year's stats just because of our, it's funny. Special teams cost us. They definitely cost us. Because of that it just felt like, for watching these games for years, there's always that play, in the recent history of the Canes, there's always that play that you're like, man, if we just didn't give that up, we would have been fine. That it was a momentum. It was just an opportunity that we didn't capitalize on. And it goes back to, it feels like at that point, well, guys, just a lot of the time, I don't want to say they quit, but the energy changed. It wasn't the same team. You're there, you didn't capitalize, and it got you down, and all of a sudden the game swung in a different way. Whereas if you capitalize, you get that touchdown or you add that field goal, hell, you just steal the possession away. It makes so much of a difference in the end result of the game. Football games, even blowouts, games that are, people think wire to wire, this team had no shot. There's always a moment where something swung, where, man, a guy misread it, tipped a pass, the ball gets picked, it comes back. Something that changes, and it demoralizes, it changes the energy. The best teams work through that. There's always usually a play that kind of set the tone for that you just wonder, if that didn't happen, would that game have gone the way it did? And as much as special teams cost us, special teams was our only points last year. And I will point out that, Borregales, while he kicked 3 field goals and he was the reason we scored, he also missed 2 field goals. And I know one was long, but 3 of 5, you look back and say, man, if he hits those field goals, what was this score? 17-9. He hits those other 2 field goals, 17-15. We have an opportunity at the end. You hit one of those other field goals, it changes the play calling at the end of the game anyway. So you have to capitalize. And finally, what I will say is the red zone, scoring on the red zone. We were 4 for 4 scoring last week, 2 field goals, 2 touchdowns. You got to be at least 75, 80%. If you're in the red zone 4 times, score at least 3 of them. We'll come out. I think a game like this could be similar, ultimately, despite our score predictions, to what we saw last year on some level. Getting in the end zone once or twice even will go a long way. And for me, that opening kickoff, you touched on Rashard, a guy, the hidden yardage. Restrepo, I think in weird situations, weird punts where you're like, hey, back to the goal line, he still needs to be the guy because of his sure-handedness. I don't want to see any fumbles. You can't take those risks. can't play not to lose. You can't fumble the ball, and put the team in great field position. But I think that capitalizing on the first drive, setting the tone early will go a long way too. Just like we struck first against Miami of Ohio, if we can do that, and that's the reason I get so upset with last year, against Texas A&M, is we were close, right? They kicked, we came down, we scored a field goal, boom, the game's right there. Stole the possession back. We stymied them. We had them. We had great field position, and then boom, Stevenson fumbled that ball, and it felt like everything changed. And even at that point, maybe all we do is add a field goal. But now, if you look, maybe he kicked 6 field goals that game instead of 5, but he makes that extra one, and that just changes the outcome of the game. You can't screw up opportunities, and you can't not capitalize in the red zone. That's all it is. So we got to capitalize, strike fast, strike early, control the tempo, control the ball. I like how this could go. I do. I know it's blind optimism that every college football fan has in the beginning of the season. And maybe that's what we have right now, but I think we're both on the same page that we could see something. And I like the energy and the commitment, and everything I saw differently in week 1 just felt a little different than last year. Case in point, most importantly, is just, I feel like we're on the verge of building a nice little wall there at the offensive line. And that is something that has been long desired. With that, guys, we've been going for a while, a lot to unpack here. We'll be back next week talking about this again. Don't forget, like Garrett always says, like and subscribe, follow me, check out my articles on Yardbarker. We'll probably pin the most recent Canes article in the video here, but thanks for joining us with Canescast. I'm Phil Van Pelt.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Garrett Halsey signing out. Go Canes.
All about you. Go Canes.